community. And this is going to be our Inside the Author Studio interview with Fulbright scholar Larry Robertson. I'm so glad that you've joined us. If you know me, you know we like to jump right in. So in a moment, I'm going to be giving the introduction of our guest. I hope that you have pen and paper. In 17 years of Maui Writers Conference, our authors didn't agree on anything except this: ink it when you think it. And Larry is going to be revealing the ups and downs of the creative process. He's going to be sharing insights about how he picks his topics for his ink blogs and his CEO World blogs, and what went into writing his best-selling books, and how he got his endorsements and so forth. So it's going to be some storytelling, and it's going to be some pragmatic tips that you can put into practice to be a rebel on behalf of your writing. So let's go ahead and start with our introduction. What does Nobel Prize winner Muhammad Yunus and Robin Chase of Zipcar and Peter Senge of The Fifth Discipline, what do they have in common? Well, they've all endorsed Larry's book. What does Discovery Channel and Visa and the Nature Conservancy have in common? Well, they've all hired Larry to work with their organization as a consultant or as a speaker. And what do Inc. and Fast Company and CEO World and Thrive Global have in common? Well, they all feature Larry's columns. And it is because, as you're about to discover, he is a visionary on behalf of identifying what could be needed in the business world, doing a deep dive into it, developing substantive insights that create a rising tide, raising all book that benefits everyone who reads it. Welcome, Larry.
Thank you, Sam. And what a kind and generous introduction. I'm happy to be here.
You bet. Well, Larry, it's as I promised the group, we're going to jump right in. So go back to the beginning of your writer's journey and put us in the scene where you decided this was something that you wanted to do.
Yeah, so that was 3 books ago. My third one came out in June, but it's pretty straightforward. It's what I think of as my put up or shut up moment. I had actually spent a lot of time before I ever worked on my first actual book project talking about writing a book. It's something I really wanted to do, and other things. I'd even engaged with several partners at different points on potential book projects where I think we spent more time waiting for the other to do the work than we actually did moving down the path of writing a book. And eventually all of that became a real annoyance to me. You know, it was, okay, if you really want to write a book, then it's time to figure out why and whether or not that why is serious enough. And then it's time to get going. So that was the first thing I invested in was the time to really ask, why do I want to do this? And then the second thing I invested was the time to say, I'm going to actually set aside the time, go through the steps and see if this is something that I'm capable of, letting each step tell me if the value is still there. So that's really what kicked it off. But there was that long period beforehand where it was a lot more talk than action.
And Larry, did you know exactly what you wanted to write about, or did you have several projects and you weren't quite clear which one was going to be the lead book?
It was more the latter, and none of those initial projects, the ones with partners, became any of the 3 books that I've written. So, you know, it was easier to answer that question as to why when I was focusing in on the topic of my first book, which was entrepreneurship. And what really happened to me was that I was living in that entrepreneurial universe, playing a variety of roles. And I kept hearing an inconsistency in the conversations, in what other people were saying about entrepreneurship. And the inconsistency was most of the people who called themselves entrepreneurs or worked in that universe had never taken the time to stop and say, what is entrepreneurship? And who is really behind it? And more importantly, what leads to the lasting impact that we associate with entrepreneurs that attracts us to them? And it became such an annoyance to me, such a noise in the back of my head, that I felt it was a really important thing to look into deeper and to convey to other people, not just what I knew in that moment, but in a larger sense. And that really became my why for that book.
You know, Larry, I hope that people are listening with a discerning filter of what pops out that they can use in their project. And boy, you just identified a good why for a book where there's an inconsistency, where we see something happening where there's a gap between what people believe and what actually works, or what they're being advised to do, and it's backfiring. And as you say, when there's this conflict going on, or when there is this contrast between the norm and what ought to be, that's a good why for a book, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Good.
Absolutely. And the other interesting thing, Sam, is that if that's what gets you started, taking that extra step and being very specific about your why
Mhm.
actually becomes this really important tool. It's a filter, and it becomes a mitigator for your own inconsistencies as a writer.
Good for
So
you.
being able to return to that as you go along in your book project allows you to do everything from look in that corner or under that stone that you want to avoid because you're just so busy writing the book, but something in your gut tells you should check that out too. Being willing to embrace the story that runs counter to your story to see what's actually there. And then probably most of all, being willing to let go of or kill stories, as they say, kill some of your own children or some of your own ideas if they're inconsistent with why you're writing the book and what the theme is. So why is a pretty magical force.
Good for you. All right. So, well, now I get to ask a question, Larry, is that in 17 years of Maui Writers Conference, I think every single keynoter we had, someone in the audience would bring up this question. So I get to ask you. Sound good?
Sure.
Okay. What's your go-to process? Because all those writers, they didn't agree about what process. Some would say you have to write first thing in the morning. Dave Barry would say, I don't get going till the afternoon. Terry Brooks would say you have to use an outline. Elizabeth George would say, I never use an outline. So what was your go-to process?
Yeah, it's funny because I looked and listened to a lot of those other people, some of them that you even named, I was in search of a process, or that's what I thought. But I'll tell you what really worked for me. I finally figured out some things about myself. So it wasn't the process that was the discovery. It was learning these things about myself and letting everything flow through that. So one thing that's a little more tied to what you're asking is, I know I'm more creative and more focused in the morning. So if I'm going to have dedicated time, that's where it's going to be for me, right? And that's not true for everybody. The second thing is that I figured out that writing, writ large, is so much more than writing. It's research. It involves what I call thought walks, meaning I get out of my office and into spaces that don't have anything to do with the topic to freshen my thoughts. It's keeping that notepad or scrap of paper in my pocket and collecting those. And it's reading broadly. So that really led to the biggest thing I learned about myself, which was I like that variety. I don't want to sit down and write every single morning. Sometimes I'll go through periods where I do, but it's not consistent. So I wouldn't say that's my process. My goal is really to be engaged in that larger writing process in some way every day. So that can range from research to a long hike to actually sitting down and putting pen to page.
There's this great quote that angels whisper to a man when he walks, and it sounds like that's what happens on your thought walks, huh?
Yes, absolutely. And the more I do it, the more creativity I find is released with time over weeks and months and things like that.
And when you're on your thought walks, Larry, do you have Otter.ai, or how do you ink it when you think it so you capture those sparks of inspiration that occur to you when you're walking?
Yeah, so sometimes I carry, I prefer to have pencil and paper with me. I worked for this company that focused on a lot of this research for a while, but there's a connection between motor and touch and your mind. So that's my preference. But I will admit sometimes I just have my phone and I go to notes and I make notes to myself. As long as I have something there to capture it, that's the most important thing. But the more creative thing for me is when I can actually make my hand do the work on the page. And I don't just write things down, I draw pictures and, I highlight things in a different way. So it's almost a code to myself.
You're so right about the kinesthetic imprinting of it, and the right and left brain, artistic as well as the words, right? All right, now let's go back to, once again, when you were starting writing, what was the best advice you got before you started your books?
The best advice that I ever got. Well, I'll tell you, it's really become two things, and they were both there at the beginning. The first is know why you're writing, period. I mean, it is amazing to me the number of writers, sometimes myself included, who start writing because they want to write, or they have this enormous amount of information and they want to get it down in some form to share, but they don't know why. And so knowing that why you're writing is critically important. And we've already talked about some of that. It's a North Star kind of thing. And knowing that you have that North Star out there and reminding yourself to call on it is critical in lots of ways in the entire writing process and beyond it. The second piece of advice was given to me by this incredibly talented, wise, caring, tenacious friend. Can you hear yourself in this description, Sam Horn? So Sam told me that when I choose resources, people or things that are going to help me in whatever point in the process I'm in, and you will need help, period, that I should always be looking for what's going to take me to the next level. And I've always kept that line in my head. Is this going to take me to the next level from where I am, whatever it is? It can be a person or a technique or a resource of some other kind. So knowing why I'm writing and knowing that I'm searching for that thing that will always take me to the next level have been key for me.
Well, thank you for the shout out, and kudos to you for always leveling up.
Yep. It's so important.
You know, this is the second most frequently asked question of all of our people at Maui Writers Conferences. Did you ever have a dark night of the soul? Did you lose confidence or imposter syndrome or writer's block? Something like that happened to you?
What, I only get one?
Yeah.
So, you know, I don't know. The way I think about it is, are there troughs? You know, because writing is, for me, writing is about waves. I think it's true for many people. And sometimes you're cresting, other times you're in a trough. Most times you're somewhere in the middle. I'm also a believer that where there are waves, there's an ocean. So I think in terms of those long-term possibilities, but for me, it's really learning how to ride those waves. Knowing why is part of that, you know, returning to it often is part of it, and being willing to trust yourself that what you're writing in this moment isn't the best that you have to give. There will always be something better. So sometimes we hang on so tightly to what we're writing in this moment that we can't even see that it's lost its way from our purpose or what our audience needs to hear. You know, your audience doesn't need as much information as you think. They need information that they can do something with, that they can build on, that they can relate to. And a lot of times you're writing about information that's important to you, or is a favorite child or something like that, but it's not really that important. And I find that when I'm in a trough, it's often because I've lost my way and I'm writing about a story that I love that really isn't that important to my reader.
Wow. Okay, well, that's a meme right there, Larry, is that writing is about the waves. And Kendra Ray is our community manager. And so, Kendra, I bet you're going to turn that into a quote image that we gift Larry afterwards. And if you're thinking, I want to ask a question, I'm going to ask one more question. And then please put your question into chat. And Kendra is going to be looking at the questions, and then we'll be posing your question to Larry. So one more question, Larry. And then if you have a question, please put it in chat, and Kendra will be forwarding it to Larry. So what surprised you most? You know, what is something you didn't see coming about writing a book or being a published author? It was unexpected.
Yeah. Again, I'll fall on two things that immediately pop into my head. One is the unbelievable range of audiences that you're actually working for as you put together a book project. The audience changes from the time you're thinking about a book and pitching it in a book proposal, to when you're trying to forge a relationship with a publisher, to the time when you're working with that publisher to create the book, all the way down to that audience we think typically is the only one, the ones that are going to buy your book. But really, there are these audiences all along the way, and being able to recognize that and shift for it is critically important. I think the second thing that continues to surprise me after 3 books now is how much more work there is to do after you're done than when you're actually writing the book. And that is sharing it, promoting it, marketing it, learning more about how people are reacting to it. It's enormously important, and it's a lot of work.
You know, and when we come back from questions with the group, we're going to be talking about marketing and your best practices about marketing. And we'll talk about your publishing path, whether you went hybrid, self-publishing, traditional publisher, and if you're happy with your choice. So
Sure.
we're going to be getting to all of that in just a moment. Kendra, though, what's a question for Larry from our group?
All right. We have Catherine says, I like the connection you bring up between writer and reader. How do you stay connected to the needs of your audience?
That's a great question. So my audiences are overlapping, but they're not quite the same. So that's the first thing I'll put out there. But one thing I try to do is listen to them. And since I can't have a conversation with every single reader, in fact, not every single reader even comments on your writing, I try to put myself in their space. And I try to read other things that they're reading, because people talk about them in their comments, or by the website they're in, the kinds of things they're interested in. So frankly, one of the ways I stay most informed is to be a reader, and to really think in that larger sense, not just about how people are reacting to me, but what is it they're busy doing? What kind of problems are they weighing? What are they searching for out there? People are pretty revealing about all of those things if you're willing to listen and pay attention.
So Larry, to follow up on Catherine's question, do you crowdsource, or do you ask people on Facebook for their feedback, or so what's a very specific way where you get to find out, as you said, what their problems are or what they need that you could include that would be really relevant for them?
Yeah, one of the very specific ways I do that is I am a public speaker as part of my profession as well. And so I test out my ideas. Even before I'm writing them as a book, I might be convinced that they're solid. I might have a lot of good data and examples to back them up. And then I put them before a live audience, and there's no better way to, it's like being a stand-up comedian. It either lands or it doesn't. And actually, I learn a lot from my audience, not just in terms of how they react to what I put out there, but what they relate it to. Oh, that reminds me of. And one of the habits that I've developed for myself over the past 15 years of writing professionally is when somebody says, that book was really influential to me, or I really like what this person has to say about this topic, I go check it out. I actually have become a more robust reader for that reason, but I feel like I'm constantly informed then, and I'm constantly asking myself questions rather than just relying on the answers I've already come up with.
That's a great answer, Larry. It's Kendra, how about other questions from our group?
Yes. Ariel says, has your gut ever told you to put something into your writing or take something out, and your publisher or other guide disagreed? And if so, how did you handle that?
So the quick answer to that is all the time. And I'm a big believer. So I'm a body surfer. We were talking about surfing earlier. I've graduated from boards down to body with age. But when I was a kid, my dad was a body surfer. And I remember asking him, how do you do that? And I was very, analytical about it. How do you break it down? Where do you start? Where do you do this? And my father, I hated him in the moment, but I've loved him for it ever since, said, you just kind of have to get the feel. And so it really, for me, is about diving in that way and playing with it so that you can do the other thing my father says, which is trust your gut. And I do that. So when my gut is telling me something is important, especially when my publisher disagrees with it, I have a conversation with them. You're not going to win every conversation. And in fact, most conversations end as a draw. And I've had more than one publisher, and they've said, listen, if you think that's best, then you make the decision and go with it. So you'd be surprised how much, when you're willing to put out new information and your own feelings about it, sometimes, most of the time, they actually put it back in your camp. But the real key is when your gut is telling you something, you've got to raise it, at least to have the conversation, no matter what the outcome is. Don't raise it just because you think you're going to win. Raise it because that's how you continue to invest and trust in your gut.
Okay, Kendra, we have another meme. It's body surf your book, right? Get the feel.
Yeah.
Follow the feel.
Exactly.
All right. And how about one more question from our group, please?
Okay. Catherine asked, do you start marketing the book before your writing is done?
Oh, yeah. Way before. So, one of the examples I just gave about how do I test where my thinking is going and what my writing might look like is in public speaking. Well, I'm testing the ideas of my book. That's long before I've even concluded that there's a book there, enough that I want to invest in that hard work that it takes to write a book. And then I'm testing it throughout. They talk about the marketing of a book starting in like a 3 to 5 month cycle before the publishing date. People vary on what that is. That's the official part. But before that, you're playing with ideas, not only ideas you want to express, but ideas about how you might express them. You're putting it out there to tell people that you're writing a book so that they're clued in and you can start to gain their interest before you gain their permission to make them part of promoting your book. So it's really there throughout. And then after your book is released, people fixate on the pub date, the publishing date for a book, and they center all their marketing around or very near that. The marketing of your book goes on for at least a full year afterwards. And if it's really part of a bigger mission you have, the book is just one form of it, it's continuous.
Larry, that's such a great answer, is that I have a good friend, Mary Loverty, who published a little book called Touching Tomorrow, and it did fine and so forth. 8 years later, she got a 6-figure deal from a sponsor who sent her around the country speaking for them on their dime. So, a little book, many years later, a 6-figure contract. So you are so right that a quality book has a long tail. And yep, we market, for pre-sales and for the window around the book. And if we continue to pour attention into the book and drive visibility, as we're going to talk about in a moment, it really can generate tangible bottom line results for you, can't it?
Absolutely.
Good. Okay, now continue to put your questions in comments. I'll leave a little bit of time right at the end to sneak a couple in before we need to wrap up with Larry. So I get to ask one of my favorite questions, Larry, is what's a benchmark book? I really think it's a shortcut to writing a quality book. If we know, I really respect this author or this book because of this style, or because they didn't do this, they did this, that you used the word before, it's a North Star. So what's a benchmark book or an author for you, please?
Gosh, it's almost an impossible question for me to answer because I find different writers provide me with different examples of approaches or solutions or things. So for me, it's more an amalgam. And I'm really searching for my own voice all the time, which, by the way, is kind of like, I don't know if people remember Milton Berle, but he was a comedian who was always known for stealing other people's material. Well, I like to be that Milton Berle and steal the idea of, ooh, how might I use that technique to craft my own? But ultimately, my writing is this mixture. Often from reading not just a lot, but across genres, topics, links, across writers, so that I can get a feel not just for what I like about how Sam writes, but what does that tell me that fits with how I know I write? I mean, if it doesn't match your strengths or your passions, then it might be interesting writing to read, but it's not a very good example. And for me, at least, I find I've got to look a lot of places to get down to that final answer.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, that's you use that important word voice, and to have a voice that is congruent with our vision and our values, and that sounds like us. So now a question a lot of people are interested in is, publishing path. I mean, these days we can self-publish, we can go hybrid, we can go with a traditional publisher. So how did you make your decision, and are you happy with it?
Well, so I have to say I made 3 separate decisions, one for each book, and each time I did it differently. And each time, was I happy with it? I'll put it this way. I was more happy than less happy, because every publishing path is a compromise. There's what, we talked earlier about how important it is to know why you're writing the book. Guess what? If you know why, if you really know why you're writing that book and what you want to do with it, the range of publishing options narrows quickly, because there are publishers who match what you're trying to accomplish. And for each of my books, I was trying to accomplish something different. So what I looked at was, how much does that publisher or publishing type serve what I'm trying to do in this particular project? And then, to be honest with myself about where they were not going to serve it. So it's that combination of, if you're looking for complete happiness in a publisher, I wish you luck. I think you can find lots of happiness. I think you'll find a lot more if you know exactly what you're trying to accomplish, because they're there as a partner.
Yep. Good for you. It's and now we circle back to something Catherine brought up about marketing, is that these days, many people come to me and they've spent tens of thousands of dollars on marketing, sometimes with no results. So let's cherry pick a best practice. Larry, if you say, of all the money I've spent, this was the single best thing I did to market my book, what would that be?
Oh gosh, most of the things I spent money on to market my book were not that helpful. In fact, most of the things that I did that I was told, especially in the first book, you must do this to market your book, didn't turn out to produce what I thought they would. And all the things I tried that, and this might surprise you, all the things I tried that I thought, hey, that sounds fun, actually produced something, because I was more invested in what it was. The people on the other side were more invested, and we were more, not just more creative, but more committed to what we were doing than just following the norm and, spending some money on Amazon or pouring a bunch of money into a book tour or things of that nature. I don't regret that I did those things, but the best things I got from them were the lessons to say, I probably won't do that again, or I'll do it for very specific reasons and with a lot less investment. So chasing those things that sound fun to you, they can't be irrelevant, right? But that sound fun to engage in usually leads to a greater return.
I tell you, Larry, I hope people understand what a gem of an answer that was, because these days there's a lot of shoulds. Well, you should have a book trailer, you should have, an online launch with affiliate program. Well, you should, do, and it mounts up really fast. And you brought up something that I have not heard anyone else say. Esther Hicks said, if it doesn't excite you, it's not the right path.
Yep.
And all the options you brought up of there's no guarantee they're going to pay off. So if you pick the marketing path that's genuinely fun for you and has its own merits, and you'll be glad you did, then it's not tied 100% into results, right?
It's absolutely true. And I'll add one thing to that.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, no one is going to care about your book as much as you do. And so at every step in the process, I don't care who you've partnered with and whether or not you paid a fee for that, or it's the publisher who, gave you a book deal and signed the contract. No one is going to care about it as much as you can. So you should be prepared at every stage to carry the largest portion of the burden. And if you're prepared to do that, then it's going to turn out better, because you've already made that commitment. If you struggle with it along the way, or if you say, gee, I wonder if there's an easier way if I just write a check, you're going to be disappointed.
Yeah, that's really wise advice. You just saved people a lot of money, Larry.
I'll take whatever commissions they want to send my way.
When you think about this process, 3 books, all these years, all your columns, etc., what's been the most rewarding part of being a published author, both in magazines and with your books?
Yeah. So when I hear a question like that, I tend to think about anything you've made an investment in life. Making an investment in a book is a huge investment. So other than having terrific kids and raising them as a team with my wife, writing these books comprises the single proudest thing I've ever done. I've said to audiences, I have 5 children, 2 of them are live and 3 of them are books, because it feels that way. You see the impact that you have on others in big ways and small ways. It's not just sales, it's the impact. And when someone says to you, quite unexpectedly, that your book changed their life, that there's something truly powerful about that, even when they don't. I'm proud of it because I know what it takes to write a good book. And I know I made that commitment to do it and saw it all the way through. And really, that's reason enough. It's really an amazing thing. You just have to engage in it for the right reasons.
It really is. It's a legacy, isn't it, in terms of a pebble in the pond of the difference that we continue to make with people we've never even met, correct?
Absolutely.
Now and in the future. Yeah. It's Larry, I wanted to ask about, we've talked about the hard work, the years put in as finishing a book and marketing a book, etc. How did you celebrate when your books were finished? What did you do to really, enjoy it?
Yeah, so it's changed from book to book. When that first book came out and we weren't in the middle of COVID and things of that nature, we had a huge book launch party. And frankly, it was a chance, we sold books there, but it was really a chance for me to say to people who had contributed to my life, my thinking, my book along the way, thank you. And we really had a good time. It's hard to do that for every book. So I've migrated all the way to, this third book, and it came out during COVID, and I actually did what I called the unbook tour. And the unbook tour was, I made a list of people who have been influential in my thinking around leadership, because this new book is focused around leadership. And I sent them a book as a thank you note and told them that I appreciated what they had done for the thinking in this space, and that I hope that my book might just add to their advocacy for lifetime learning. So that was kind of fun. But I'll tell you something I do that's special just for me. Each time I finish a book, I buy myself an antique typewriter. And the typewriter represents something about the theme, the experience of writing. Every one of them is completely different. But on my bookshelf, which you can't see behind my brick wall here, I have a typewriter for each one of my books, and I have this funky typewriter for my columns.
See, that's a one-of-a-kind answer, Larry. No one's ever told me that they bought an antique typewriter to celebrate writing their book. What if we're going to adapt that? It's like, that's what I mean, though, is because we hear all the time about it's hard work and we're grinding. We spend all this money, grind. No. It is a joy, and it deserves some celebration that's meaningful like that. And I bet every time you look at that antique typewriter, it's like you're happy all over again, huh?
Every time. And the reason I did that, besides the fact that I like antique things in certain categories, especially very industrial focused ones. We talked about this before. I learn from others who have written. I stand on the shoulders of many who came before me. And so looking back to the way they used to have to get their words down on paper, for me is also that reminder that many have come before me, many will come after me. And so it's a little bit of a homage to them as well.
Yeah. So, well, now we've got about 5 minutes left, Larry. So for everyone who's in our group, if you wanted to ask about how did you get those wonderful endorsements, or how do your books drive paid speaking or paid consulting, put it in chat, and Kendra will do her best to field them. What I would like to ask is, in our time together, there's so much we did not talk about, Larry. So you may be thinking, oh my goodness, this was really a pivotal part of the process, and we haven't even mentioned it. So what's something you'd like to bring up, please?
That is one of my favorite questions, Sam. and I've interviewed hundreds of people across my 3 books. And it's the kind of question I always ask at the end, because you just never know what you're going to find. It's interesting. You mentioned just in passing that sometimes people wonder, how do you get your endorsements for your book? Or in my case, how did you get those interviews? By the way, 99% of them were cold calls. And the best answer I can give is ask. It's incredible how often people don't ask. When you ask, realize that it's really asking, what can I do for you? What's the value for you in endorsing me or doing this interview or whatever it is? And when you think about it from that side, it actually brings a greater benefit back to you. You know why you're doing it, right? But if you ask with the intent of what is it doing for somebody else, it just turns into magic.
Thank you. Okay, Kendra, ball's in your court. We've got time for 2 quick questions. What's the first one, please?
I have to. Ariel asks, how do you address or handle the fear of people taking your words, title, or marketing message when testing things out and seeing what resonates with people?
Yeah, I spent a lot of time around entrepreneurs and in venture capital where people would bring us our ideas. And this may not be the answer you're looking for, but I'll say this because this is the truth. If you think what you have now is the only thing you're ever going to have to offer, the exact words you're choosing, the exact ideas, or if you think nobody else is going to have some overlap in their ideas with you, that's the thing you really should focus in here. Are you afraid of something that really isn't going to happen? Doesn't mean you shouldn't protect your intellectual property, but frankly, your ideas are much greater than anything you can share in a post, in a conversation, even in a long article. There's more to you there if you're really thinking about writing a book. And don't be afraid, because if you don't put it out there, you don't get that feedback and some of those key insights you really need.
Yeah, good advice. And Kendra, last question for tonight, please.
And I think this is the perfect one to wrap up with. Mason says that he hasn't read your books yet, but he's intrigued and he wants to know which of your books he should get first.
Oh, it's an
Perfect
impossible question. Really, it depends on your interest, but to answer very quickly, each of my books steps back from the topic and really looks at it in a broader way that most people haven't, most other writers hadn't. So my first book is about entrepreneurship. My second book is about creativity. And my third is about leadership. So maybe your guide is one of those topics something that really speaks to you. In the latter category, the one on leadership, the other thing that might speak to you is it's about leadership in uncertain times. And we are in an uncertain century. And it really calls on us to do pretty much everything we do differently to account for the times, not to try to do it in an old way. So even if that theme attracts you, there's more to that book than just leadership. But I think I would drive by the subject matter. I love all my books. I like to think each one gets a little bit better, but they get better in different ways. So I'm not going to pick a favorite child.
Mason did note that he does write for entrepreneurs, so that was right.
Nice. Then I would suggest that the last one is probably the most interesting one because it's relevant right now for what you might be writing about for entrepreneurs and what's burdening them and what they need to find, and then make your way back through the others.
Well, and you have a lot in common, Larry, because you and Mason both live in the DMV, DC area, and he's written about chutzpah. He's the chutzpah guy. So how to be a chutzpah entrepreneur and a leader. So lots in common there. So, well, I know people are thinking, I want to find out more about Larry's books and about his speaking, about his Lighthouse Consulting, about his Fulbright Scholar and the Fulbright project that you're working with, and another project you're working with, Sustainable Brands. Talk about an idea whose time has come. So Kendra is going to be putting your information in our Facebook community, all the links, so that they can do a deep dive into your work, because you're a walking, talking role model of how being an author is a way to make a tangible difference now and in the future. So we're just very grateful that you've joined us today.
Well, it's my pleasure. And as you know, Sam, because you've been an advocate of it and a leader in it, it's about community. So if you surround yourself with good people, thoughtful people, you can't help but have that rub off on you, and hopefully you've got something valuable to rub off the other way. So I appreciate your inviting me into this community to talk about this. I always learn something too.
Well, you're welcome. And by the way, we share your comments with Larry. So give him a shout out. Go ahead and put something into chat, something specific he said that really resonated with you, something that you're going to run with and that might make a difference in your writing project. And right along with Larry being our inaugural speaker for our Inside the Author Studio, next month, November 3rd, we're having a four-time Pulitzer nominee, Fawn Germer. Fawn is probably one of the most successful female keynoters in the country. Her book, Hard-Won Wisdom, she interviewed everyone from Sally Ride to Helen Thomas. And she is an extraordinary individual. And she's going to be talking both about her books and also she's got a podcast now where she's interviewing some pretty special people. And if you thought about, should I do a podcast? What are the do's and don'ts? How can it be rewarding? Those are just some of the things that she'll be sharing. So Larry, once again, what a pleasure. Thank you for kicking off our Inside the Author Studio in such a classy way. Sure do appreciate you.
My privilege. Thanks, Sam.
Onward, everyone, right on. And we look forward to seeing you in the community and finding out about your projects and how you're moving them forward. Night for now.